What's good, everyone? Once again, I am Dub Washington. I do two things. One, make banks compete to lend you money. And secondly, I ensure that everybody eats. So listen, man, I appreciate you tapping in with me on this episode. What we're going to be breaking down is the FICO scoring system. It's 16 different versions of a FICO. A lot of the times whenever we're going through the credit building journey, what happens is people are looking at FICO scores as if it's one size fits all. Meaning that most people will look at a TransUnion score. They will look at an Experian score. They will look at an Equifax score, and then they will say, hey, my Experian score is this. My Equifax score is this. My TransUnion score is this. But whenever you are talking about lending, and that's the primary reason why we build out our FICOs, is to be able to go to the banks and get lended to, whether it's a mortgage, whether it's an auto loan, whether it's personal credit cards, or my particular favorite, business credit cards. So you have to understand how to build out each individual score. And there are different weighted factors associated with a FICO 8, let's just say, versus a FICO 2, or a FICO Bankcard score 3 versus a FICO mortgage score 5. So it is different factors that's going to be heavily weighted upon building these scores. And what I want to do today is come and give you the game and make sure that you eat, because the more funding that you have access to, the longer that you're able to leverage this credit, the longer that you're able to stay in business. 1 out of 3 businesses go out of business solely based on them running out of access to capital. That's another thing that we do at Reinvented Consulting, is that we get entrepreneurs and business owners access to 0% APR capital. So if that's one of the things that you are looking for, you can tap in with my team and we'll take care of you. But listen, man, as we jump into the episode, I recommend that you do one thing. Say your grace, because in my words, everybody eats. Let's get to it. So as we jump into it, you have to understand how to build out a properly structured profile. I'm going to always use this analogy, as this is the way that I look at credit. You are sculpting a masterpiece. So each individual account that you add to your profile, banks are going to judge you by that. As we get into the personal profile structure, I want you to look at your profile as a masterpiece. You are literally sculpting a masterpiece that banks will judge you off of. Underwriters will judge you off of. So you don't want to add too many credit builder accounts. You want to build out solid comparables across all products. You don't want to be too heavily weighted upon credit cards. And this is where you talk about the credit mix of accounts. You want to have credit cards. You want to have loans, different types of loans. For example, if you have a lot of credit cards, your FICO 8 will be very high. But whenever it's time for you to go and apply for an auto loan, banks will literally judge you off of this. Banks will look at you and say, well, you don't have any borrowing history pertaining to loans. You don't have any installments. You have revolving lines, but you don't have installments. You got 16 different versions of a FICO score that you must understand. And we're going to break those down today. Now, my personal favorite is FICO 8. I am heavy on business credit cards, personal credit cards, because these are the only products that you can get 0% APR on. And we all know the name of the game is being able to leverage credit at 0% to get into different investments, to build your asset portfolio out. Now, you have 3 main categories of a FICO score. You have a FICO score, a FICO Bankcard score, and you also have a FICO Auto score. These are very important as you go and build your journey. At the end of the day, the higher the FICO score, or the higher version of a FICO score that you have pertaining to the specific lending, the more that the bank will lend to you and the better that the interest rate will be. Now, do not get caught up in just looking at your Experian, your TransUnion, and your Equifax FICO scores. Another thing that I want to kind of hit on is whenever people are coming to my company for funding, they tell me what their FICO score is. But anytime that you go for a particular credit product, what happens is you either will receive an approval or a denial. In the adverse action or the approval letter, they will literally tell you what FICO version that they use. So do not get caught up in just looking at Experian, TransUnion, or Equifax. This is very important, because each type of product that you're going for, this is going to be dependent upon a FICO version, not the bureau. As we now transition into the personal FICO breakdown, really just understanding how to build out each individual score, we literally have to look at it as how we are structuring or sculpting our masterpiece. Now, whenever we get to mortgages, I want to let you know that mortgages will be primarily based off of your FICO 5, your FICO 4, and your FICO 2. Now, you have to understand that you build this out by having a good mixture of loans. Banks do not particularly take into consideration what you have done on the credit card side, because this is a completely different product, by having a good mixture of loans. So we're talking about personal loans, auto loans. Mortgages, of course, will always help your mortgage score, but you also want to look at the payment history on loans. A lot of people overlook this part because you want to have a nice time frame. How many loans do you have, and what is the time frame of those loans, the frequency of payments? All of this will be heavily weighted on your FICO 5, 4, and 2. And as you go through, you literally have to understand this to build out this particular FICO version. Now, increasing each payment loan amounts in proportionate to previous loan amounts is going to be very key here. So as you go and build up, very similar to auto loans. Anybody is familiar with auto loans, you know they work in tiers. So as you go through, you have to understand, okay, first, I want to get a $25,000 auto loan. Then I'm able to go up to $50,000, then up to $75,000, $100,000, $150,000, etc. But you move this up in tiers, but you are building out a specific FICO version. So as you go through with your mortgage score, keep this in mind. Now, as we transition into auto loans, you have to understand that auto loans will be primarily pulling your FICO Auto Score 8, your FICO Auto Score 9, your FICO Auto Score 5, 4, and 2. Not the FICO Bankcard score. That's completely separate from what we're talking about right now. The time frame and frequency of payments is also very key as well. You want to understand this whenever you're building out this FICO score. Now, similar to the mortgage score, increasing each loan amount in proportionate to previous loan amounts is literally going to position you to get access to higher approval amounts and better APR rates. As we all know, the name of the game is getting access to higher amounts of capital at a cheaper rate. I call it getting access to cheap money. Now, credit cards, which is my absolute favorite, they're going to be heavily weighted upon your FICO Bankcard Score 8, your FICO Bankcard Score 9, FICO Bankcard Score 3, FICO Bankcard Score 4, FICO Bankcard Score 2 as well. And just as a quick recap, credit cards are based on your FICO Bankcard Score 8, 9, 3, 5, 4, and 2. Each lender may pull a different version of your FICO Bankcard score, but how do you build this out? You build this out by having high credit card limits. You also want to have a good amount of available credit. Now, we all know the name of the game is business credit. But before you can get to business credit, you have to structure your personal profile or your personal bank card, especially if you're going for credit cards, to be able to position yourself to get access to high limit credit cards. As we build out our high credit card limits, it's very important that you don't have access to too much credit. A lot of banks are starting to deny us from having access to too much credit. And the reason why is you're not using the credit. If you look at your credit reports, whether it's on TransUnion, Experian, or Equifax, you have to understand that having access to too much credit can severely hurt you. You want to have a good amount of available credit, but not too much. And banks are starting to deny a lot of business owners and a lot of entrepreneurs due to having too much available credit. How do you have too much available credit? Simply by not using it. If you pull a tri-merge report and you look at your profile, you will have what they call a recent high balance. If you have had a credit card with a $30,000, $40,000 limit and you have not used this credit card, what's going to happen is they're not going to have a balance being reported there, or they're not going to have a recent high balance reporting on your profile. The reason why is that they see that you have the availability of credit, but if you're not using it, it is very key. I recently paid off all of my personal credit cards. I had 0% utilization. My credit score dropped a few points. I then went back and put a balance on there. So I have around 300,000 in personal credit. So I put a fairly decent amount of utilization, maybe around 20,000, right? Whenever I got up to 6% utilization on my personal profile, my credit score went up. What did that tell me? That banks want to see that you are actually utilizing the credit. I recently had a funding client come through, and the denial reason that they had was credit abuse decline. They had too much available credit and they were underutilizing the credit. So before you go out and try to build out and get access to very large lines on the personal side, you must understand that having access to credit is one thing, but if you're not leveraging it, you're going to then start getting denied due to having too much available credit. Another one that a lot of people talk about is the FICO Score 10T, the FICO Auto Score 10, and the FICO Bankcard Score 10. But me personally, I have yet to see a lender lend based on your FICO 10. Things are consistently changing in the credit space. It's pretty much an evergreen space. But as of Q2 of 2025, I have yet to see any lender base their lending off of a FICO 10 score. So in totality, you want to make sure that you are building proper comparables across all FICO score versions, right? You want to not be too heavily weighted upon bank card scores. You don't want to be too heavily weighted upon auto scores. You don't want to be too heavily weighted upon mortgage scores. And I recommend having a good mix of each, because you can leverage each individual score to be able to go and get access to capital, whether you are a real estate investor, whether you are trying to grow and scale your business and you want 0% APR funding, or if you want to go and start you an auto fleet, an exotic rental car fleet, etc. Trying to convince an institution that you can handle $100,000 to $150,000 loan, but yet you've never had a $20,000 loan on your personal profile, the banks are looking at you as being risky. That's why I say you want to go and build across all account types to ensure that you're able to get any type of funding that you are seeking. Essentially, you are asking the bank to take a big risk on you with no previous account history pertaining to the type of loan, pertaining to the type of credit card that you're going for. So remember, like I always state, you are sculpting a masterpiece across your journey. You are essentially asking the bank to take a big risk on you. Now, of course, if you can show documentation, whether it's revenue, whether it's income, etc., now it's a different ball game whenever you're speaking on that aspect. You literally have to understand how to structure these different FICOs to ensure that you're able to get access to capital. Monthly income is going to be an important one, because if you're trying to get an institution to take a bet on you, if you're trying to get an institution to lend you anywhere from $100,000 to $150,000 for a personal loan on a business loan, but you've never had any prior history of taking out even a $20,000 personal loan on your profile, the banks are going to deem you as very, very high risk. But also you have to take into consideration, if you are providing documentation to show that you have the monthly income to be able to afford this loan, then the game changes. The higher the monthly income, the more flexible lenders will be with you on the particular FICO used for that product. If you've never taken out a personal loan, but you can show that you have $100,000, $150,000 a month coming in, then the banks know that you can afford this type of loan, and then they will lend to you. But the fastest way for you to get access to a loan with no prior loan history is either showing revenue or you showing history of being able to borrow from the bank. What does your borrowing power look like? Which that's a very important concept. Whenever I say borrowing power, I am referring to how much have you borrowed from the bank before. Let me tell you something. You will not be able to go to each of these institutions and just get access to 0% funding and never let the bank make money off of you. Banks base their lending off of credit worthiness and profitability. That is very, very important. So either you're credit worthy or you're profitable.